The HOA said my land didn't matter, that their new neighborhood could stretch right over it. 96 homes built on property that wasn't theirs. I watched every nail driven, every fence post raised, and every smug board meeting where they called me the problem. But I stayed quiet. I let them build their dream community, right on top of my patience. Because what they didn't know was that I owned everything they were standing on. And when the time came, I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just pulled one document from my file and changed their world forever. What happens when arrogance meets ownership? Before any of this turned into a legal nightmare, life in Ridgewood Estates felt picture perfect. Wide streets lined with identical mailboxes, trimmed lawns, and the faint hum of sprinklers in the evening. It was the kind of neighborhood realtors call peaceful, where everyone waved but no one really knew each other. I had bought my property years before the HOA was even formed, 10 quiet acres just beyond the edge of town. I liked the open space, the privacy, the idea that my land was mine and mine alone. When the developers started building the new subdivision next door, I didn't mind. At first it felt harmless, progress, maybe even good for property value. Then came the letters, formal envelopes with logos and fine print, politely telling me to align my fencing and adjust boundary markers to meet the community's design standards. It was strange considering I wasn't part of their HOA, but when I called the board president, he spoke to me like a child who didn't understand the rules. "It's all been approved," he said. "Your property is technically within the new development zone now." That didn't make sense. I still paid my own taxes, held my own deed. Nothing had changed. But the tone in his voice, calm and dismissive, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't asking for permission. They were telling me what was going to happen. And somewhere deep down I realized this wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about control. It started with a notice on my gate, laminated, official-looking, signed by someone who didn't live anywhere near me. It claimed my property was in violation of HOA standards for fence height and exterior maintenance. The absurd part? I wasn't even in their jurisdiction. But that didn't stop them. Within weeks, I was getting multiple letters, each one more aggressive than the last. Failure to comply may result in penalties and legal action. At first, I tried reasoning with them. I emailed the board, attached my deed, county maps, and even a letter from the assessor's office proving my land was separate. Their response? Silence. Then another violation notice arrived, this time for unauthorized structures. They were talking about my barn, a barn that had stood there for 15 years before any of their cookie-cutter homes existed. The developers had poured millions into that new subdivision, and every inch of land was profit. Somewhere along the way, they'd redrawn the boundaries, quietly, on paper, and my property had been swept into their domain without so much as a conversation. The HOA acted like it was settled law, as if their word overruled my deed. Soon, surveyors started showing up uninvited. They'd walk my property line with measuring tapes and clipboards, nodding like they owned the place. Then the construction crews arrived, trucks rumbling down my driveway, workers unloading supplies and marking plots that extended onto my land. When I confronted one of them, he shrugged. "We've got clearance from the HOA. Says this area is part of the new phase." I stood there staring at the stakes hammered into my soil. They were literally building on my property. The next few weeks were chaos. Foundations were poured, walls went up. I called the county again. They opened an investigation but told me to remain calm while they sorted out the records. Meanwhile, the HOA board president, that smug man in the pressed polo, left me a voicemail saying, "You'll thank us when your property value goes up." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized they weren't making a mistake. They were daring me to fight, so I watched. Quietly, I documented everything, every fence post, every new home, every invoice they mailed. I didn't interfere, didn't threaten, didn't even speak at the community meetings they invited me to attend. I just kept collecting evidence. By month 6, there were nearly 100 homes built, 96 to be exact. Families had moved in. Children played on sidewalks that ran across my acreage. The HOA celebrated the completion of Phase 3 with banners, music, and speeches about community growth. And through it all, not one person questioned where the land came from. I could have stopped them early on, could have filed an injunction, or forced the county to halt development. But I didn't. I wanted them to finish. I wanted them to sink every last dollar into what they believed was theirs. Every nail they drove in only tightened the trap they didn't know they were walking into. Neighbors began to notice something was off. A few asked if I'd sold the land. I just smiled and said, something like that. The HOA president, confident as ever, sent me one final notice, a demand that I remove all non-compliant signage and landscaping by the end of the month. That's when I knew the time had come. Because behind my calm, patient silence was the one thing they had never bothered to check, the original deed. The one with my name on it. The one that proved every house, every road, every mailbox they built was sitting squarely on my property, and I was ready to show them. The courtroom was packed, HOA board members in their matching suits, developers whispering nervously behind their attorneys, and a handful of homeowners who came just to see what would happen. I sat alone at the front, a single folder resting on the table in front of me. Months of silence, humiliation, and trespass had led to this moment. Their lawyer started strong, polished, confident, talking about zoning adjustments and community expansion. He painted me as an old landowner clinging to the past, resistant to progress. The judge nodded politely, flipping through pages until my turn came. I stood up, opened the folder, and laid down a single document. The original deed, registered, notarized, and untouched since the day I bought the land. Then I placed another, a recent survey from the county assessor showing the development's entire third phase sitting squarely within my boundary lines. The room went silent. The HOA president leaned forward, his smirk finally gone. The developer's face turned pale as he scanned the map projected on the courtroom screen. 96 homes, built on property that wasn't theirs. Their lawyer stammered, asking for a recess. The judge didn't grant it. She turned to me and asked one question. Are you seeking damages or forfeiture? I paused, letting the silence hang. Everyone was waiting. The board, the crowd, the neighbors who had mocked me for months. And then I said quietly, forfeiture. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. That one word meant everything. It meant every house, every streetlight, every inch of that community now belonged to me. The HOA had built their empire on stolen land, and I had just taken it all back. The judge's gavel came down. The case was decided. I didn't celebrate. I just gathered my folder, nodded once, and walked out, past their stunned faces, their whispered panic, their world collapsing behind me. Because justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it signs its name on the dotted line. In the months that followed, Ridgewood Estates looked nothing like the glossy brochures that once sold it. The banners came down. The HOA office was emptied overnight. Lawyers swarmed the place, scrambling to negotiate settlements that were never going to happen. Homeowners, the same people who had ignored my warnings, now had to face the reality that the land beneath their homes wasn't theirs. Some moved out quietly. Others tried to fight, blaming the developers, the board, even me. But the truth was simple. They had all built their peace of mind on someone else's foundation. I didn't take pleasure in their ruin. Not really. I rented some of the houses back to the families who treated me with respect. The rest? I sold off, acre by acre, to pay for the legal costs they forced me to endure. What was left became what it always should have been. My land under my name without anyone telling me what color my fence should be or how tall my grass could grow. The old HOA president? He vanished from town before the papers hit the news. The development company filed for bankruptcy 6 months later. But every time I drive down that once perfect street, I remember what this fight was really about. It wasn't money. It wasn't power. It was a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones, the ones everyone underestimates, hold the loudest truth of all. Because when arrogance builds on borrowed ground, sooner or later the earth takes everything back.